I'm Phoebe. I don't know how much exposure or practical work you get during the diploma, so it's probably nice for you to hear an actual story from someone in the room. So I thought I'd do some storytelling first, and then we're going to move into the second half, talking sort of about recovery and what that means to me, and about how our services sort of work and what's good and bad. And I'm going to throw in lots of different perspectives, and they are critical perspectives. Some ideas are my own, some I'm very much inspired by other ideas. So I just wanted to expose you in the second half to things that you might not hear in this course. And in fact, a lot of people studying at university don't get a lot of exposure to this either, for certain reasons, although it is starting to happen. I do have a qualification through Curtin University as a lived experience educator. I hope that you really gain from lots of different things I'm going to say, and some of it might rub you the wrong way, some of it might be quite shocking, some of it you're just going to disagree with, but it's my job as someone who wants to be a change agent and is a bit activisty, to just park ideas in the room, just so that you're aware that the ideas are out there, because you're probably going to come across some of them. That was me sharing a little bit of my story, and part two, you can be talking about recovery and how that personal growth and development and recovery is very different but very important to everyone who's had these kind of lived experiences. I've got quite a few slides, and it's a bit of a mishmash of different lectures I've given recently, but it is relatively chronological, so it should all make sense as we go along. Now, I am quite critical of lots of different things, and also I acknowledge lots of great things, and I see value in little bits of value in almost everything. So at some points of this I'm going to sound like a real anti-psychiatrist activist, but it's some of the more extreme views I really hold to very true, but I actually do also acknowledge value in certain things, and I work in services as well as being a service user, and as well as being a lecturer, and all those other things that were on my intro PowerPoint. So I actually do have quite a balanced overall view, because I work in so many different spaces, and some of them are very progressive, some are not. So I've got lots of different personal and professional experiences that make up my general ideas. And as I said earlier, some of my ideas are very much inspired by the great work of others. Now, I presented a critique on social recovery in America last year at a World Summit, and this is a very reductionist, whatever the correct term is, I use them interchangeably. Now, clinical recovery just had a lot of critique, and I think I'll get into that a bit later. Social recovery became more popular because I think it makes more sense that your sense of connectedness, your relationships, your sense of belonging to the community, active citizenship, involvement in all of your environments makes sense. We're human beings and just need to be connected. That's how we are. We need each other, and that saying, no man is an island. You just can't do things on your own. So this is really great, but I think it ignores a few quite serious issues. Is that it's not just me. Like, I can physically go out and go to the barbecue and join groups for people like me, which is great, but when I go into other groups and I'm trying to I'm present and I'm physically there, but I don't know how real this is on an authentic level of connectedness, because I can physically be there and I'm trying to have an active citizenship, and I'm trying to make connections and relationships in a society that does actively stigmatise me and is prejudiced and discriminatory against me, and I'm subject to stereotyping. Then it's pretty bloody hard. Like, I can go out and do my bit, but it's actually just not me who's sick. And one of my common references is that what we have is a sick society. We don't have the understanding, some of us even have the awareness, and we don't always have the empathy that we need to have. And so society can promote all these ideas, go and join clubs and do groups. Well, it takes a little bit more than that. So that was a very basic critique, is that's also potentially disempowering, because some of that isn't real. And some of it is, but I'm generalising on the deep meaning, authentic conceptualisation of connectedness and togetherness and acceptance. Okay, so now this is a paper that I love, Harper and Speed 2012, and this is sort of where some of my critique comes from. So a lot of people like me that have been diagnosed and socially labelled for the rest of their life, there are structural and systemic reasons, things that actually cause us even more distress and that ultimately end up being the main cause of our distress. And my favourite quote is this one here, from Nancy Fraser, Professor Nancy Fraser, and that's for all of us. It's not just me, it's all of us need to do this. Okay, so that was just a little critique about one type of recovery, social recovery, and I'm going to reference some problems with clinical recovery as we go through this. So personal recovery is where we're at as a country. Everybody's talking about personal recovery. This is the meaningful, this is the golden nugget of recovery, is the personal recovery. Now this country doesn't have a national definition of recovery, although we are one of only 2 countries in the Southern Hemisphere that actually explicitly references personal recovery in national policy and framework, which is great, because we've acknowledged that. The problematic thing is that we haven't defined it, and it's pretty hard to deliver something if we can't define it. And that's not me saying I think we should, because I'm hesitant about that too also, because I think trying to define something so deep and something that's quite different for different people and an idea that's really needs nuanced understanding, it's quite hard to put in a document. So, but it does leave us open to that we don't always really deliver what we saying we deliver, what we want to deliver. Clinicians have this idea, and people in general, that before you can start recovery, you've got to get you stable. We've got to have some stability and a baseline. We've got to do all this stuff before you can recover, because you've got to be stable. And I would argue that there are some quite pre-contemplative stages of recovery where you can do your dreaming and imagining and hoping at any point. And you can be in the middle of a deep emotional crisis and still identify a part of yourself that you want to be different, or a feeling you want to be different, and imagine the life you want to have and the person you want to be and why. You just don't need to be stable to do that. That can happen at any point, and it's a really important part of recovery. Just idealising about how things might be different, you know, and it was a really important thing for me. And I think that this idea of stability is quite problematic for me, because I think that we can never create a life that is just going to be permanently easier, and it'll ultimately just be impenetrable to more distress and instability because we're just so well recovered. Life isn't like that. It throws curveballs at you all the time. You're not going to be stable all the time. So I think starting out that way and trying to create that from the beginning, let's do 3 months of stability and then you can start recovering. Well, so that's just a personal reflection of how I feel about the idea of stability before recovery. Stability actually comes often as a result of a recovery process in which you find meaning and purpose. So if we can help someone find meaning and purpose, something to get up for in the morning, a sense of identity, a sense of contributing to the world, this thing they're living for, some passion, some aspiration or inspiration, if someone uncovers that and starts working toward it, regardless of how unstable that might be, but they're idealising that and they're trying to live that, that evolves the stability. That will come. So we don't want to sit around and wait for people to be stable. Could be waiting forever. My life now is just still not stable. I'm okay with that. I've accepted that. I've reached a point where I can deal with that really well. So yeah, let's not wait for people to be stable. So for me, recovery, I'm not actually particularly keen on the term recovery, because I prefer the term discovery, because for me it's a personal growth journey. But recovery really relates to this idea that we are very sick and now we're getting better. For someone like me that does not believe that I am or was ever sick due to lack of evidence and science in that. The word recovery jars me a bit, and I think sometimes we've used the idea of rehabilitation and sort of rebadged it as recovery, and that's problematic as well, because if I break my leg, I expect a treatment where later I'll just be able to walk the exact same way as before. You know, I'm recovered and I'm rehabilitated and it's all fixed and I'm the same. And I don't think anyone after lived experience goes back to who they were before, because how could you with all your experience? You're going to be different. And I would postulate that a lot of people after their lived experience who've had a really great journey, even if they could go back to who they were before, I wouldn't want to. Clinicians often sometimes forget is that life can actually be even better than before. You can actually go on to be a whole new and improved version if you're reaching that self-mastery level. But I think even people that don't go for these extremes, balancing their life maybe in a softer way than I do, I think a lot of those people would still say, no, I feel I've learned so much about myself, my problems, my life. I mean, I've learned so much about my worldview, what my opinions are. I've learned about my world, and I've learned about my place in it. And I never would have had that before. So I'm in the best position I've ever been. So we don't always acknowledge that. So deep self-exploration for me was uncovering, uncovering my values. What are my 10 core values, and what are my top 3 core values that are going to drive me in all areas of the rest of my life, that I'm going to commit to, always have an awareness with, and never compromise, because I need a new identity now. And I'm hoping to publish my book where I'm postulating a recovery framework that I call re-identification, and I'm going to call it the discovery framework. And I've identified things that were just really important to me, and some of these are quite, I don't know if universal is the right word, but you're probably in the room going, that sounds great, I'll have some of that. So this was kind of the start of my menu. And for me, having a career in mental health was really important to me, because I wanted to give back and contribute and help improve services in the lives of others. So having a paid career or an accomplished career isn't essential for everyone at the start of the recovery or at the end. They're looking for other purpose that doesn't involve paid work, and that's fine. And they had all these other things going on. So I'm basically re-identifying, and I'm just creating a new me. Okay, so I'm not recovering from an illness. I'm going through personal growth and self-development and learning and self-driven education towards this point. Now, the third thing for me was what I call my dreaming space, and this was so integral to how I was able to conceptualise and visualise this life I wanted. And I mapped out all the potential things that I could do and achieve. And this was the fun part of recovery, because I think sometimes, especially in statutory services, recovery is always presented as this intensely hard and difficult and challenging time in your life, and it is, totally it is. It's also one of the best things that you will ever do in your life, is go on recovery or discovery. And I think lots of people who've never had any mental health challenges would probably love some of this stuff too. And that's why we have life coaches, that's why we have all these other seminars and things going on in the world, and self-help books. People actually just love this stuff. You don't have to have mental health challenges to go on and recover yourself or re-identify yourself or discover your life. And there was always learning and self-development at every stage. It was a really key thing for me, was self-education. Idols and mentors, idols aren't necessarily people that you idolise, a celebrity or a politician or whoever. Maybe not a politician, I know. But mentors are people that you really respect and admire for certain things. Could be a family member, could be anyone. But there's someone you sort of want to emulate and learn from. And you bring them into your life and you actively engage with them. And I have a significant few of these that have really guided me so well, personally and professionally, in some cases both. And this is really important. I often lecture occupational therapy students, and they're into valued occupations. So that's their language. It's so clunky. And they're into it. The first thing that they do in the first couple of years of their units, what often gets reflected to me in the assessments that I mark, is find a hobby and get connected with relationships. And it's all great, you just got to do that. But for me, finding a hobby and something fun to do was actually not a very big part of my journey. And I think my last 10 minutes is going to be about some problematic things in our services. And most of what I'm about to say is directed at mainstream services, like statutory government sort of services, because we say that personal recovery is about empowerment. It's actually one of the listed major principles of personal recovery is empowerment. Now, I've got this view on empowerment that the only real form of empowerment is self-empowerment. You can't actually empower somebody else, not on a deep level, not authentically. And what I mean by that, excuse me, and I often hear clinicians say, I've empowered somebody today. I offered them the choices and they chose one. They've selected some treatments. And I go, wow, you've allowed someone some power. You gave a little bit of your power and you have presented them with this power. I've empowered you. Now, the problem with that, if I have to ask someone for some power and I have to wait to be to have this power bestowed on me, and I accept this power and then I use it, I'm not self-empowered. The real form of empowerment, self-empowerment, that actual transaction of the giving of from the holder of power and the giving of that power to somebody else, that transaction, paradoxically I think is the word, is ultimately disempowering. And this is how services work. Now, the reason I'm talking about empowerment, personal recovery, because our services say they do personal recovery and they actually can't. And the main reason that we can't offer self-empowerment is because we only have one model. All we have in this country, as mainstream and statutory services, is the westernised biological psychiatry model. We have psychiatry. And psychiatry's view is that you're sick. There's no other way to view this. I'm a doctor, I'm diagnosing you with this thing. Slap that label on you, you can never get rid of that. And we just probably need to use medication forever because you're sick. And that's our offering. So I don't know how we're ever going to achieve personal recovery if we just ram a disease model down somebody else's throat, especially when there's actually no evidence of that. And there's a lot of people walking around the public going, oh yes, there's chemical imbalance, you know. It's like an actual medical disease. And you need medication because it cures and it fixes it. And yeah, it's serotonin. And some people have heard of there's this dopamine hypothesis, quite weak, never been proven, just like the other imbalance theories. And we just have this myth that there's a chemical thing going on. There actually isn't any conclusive, we just don't know what that is. And then we use medication for people. We call it medication. We give it nice names like antipsychotic, antidepressant, and mood stabilizer. They're actually just psychoactive drugs that alter the way you feel and think and behave through toxicity. That just makes things a bit easier for you for a while because you just become blunt and emotionally different, and that can be really helpful sometimes. And it just makes you more socially palatable to everyone around you. It's just easier for everyone when we're on medication. And these medications are really dangerous, but they're not presented to patients in a drug-centred way. So I find the fact that within our disease model, we haven't even yet to this day, this year, got a really good and strong hypothesis with conclusive evidence to prove one underlying biological mechanism to cause even one of the so-called disorders that we've based an entire book on, hunger disorders. We actually don't even have a really well-proven hypothesis, I think, for one disorder. But we made this book years ago of all these diseases. But science is saying we don't actually know what these mechanisms are. I mean, the dopamine hypothesis for schizophrenia was on about the amount of dopamine produced. And they just put 2 and 2 together and got 5, going, oh, people that have schizophrenia it's actually caused by this dopamine production, and it's this. And actually, when critical psychiatry and critical researchers actually go through how sound that research is, okay, and what that evidence is, they're going, that doesn't mean that. That's not even relevant. That could be from anything. But we get a lot of research that the results are massaged, and I'm going into a different lecture now, and some stuff that shows the opposite does not get published. Starting to get published now, but Joanna Moncrief, one of the most famous psychiatrists in the world, she's the co-founder and chair of the Critical Psychiatry Network, has done a lot on YouTube saying it's not that honest and it's not very transparent to tell people they're sick. Because we just don't know that. We don't know what these mechanisms are. And to give people psychoactive, toxic, dangerous drugs to help them along and give them a repeat script for 20 years, for me, verges on unethical, because we're just not being very honest. Okay, so people are out there with these views thinking that things are proven and they're facts just because you read a study, or even, especially one in a magazine article, or from the media, even worse, or from big pharma's, the worst place to get research. Just because you read something that says this is strong supporting evidence for the hypothesis or such and such. Yeah, that's what it is. It's some good supporting evidence for an idea. Doesn't mean the idea is a fact. Doesn't mean we discovered anything. We've been doing this for years. And psychiatry started out in a moral, I think it was called the moral psychiatry era. We didn't actually see people as sick. We saw them as quite disturbed. We didn't know. So we tried to be supportive when we would put people in hospitals, and yes, there's bad parts. But the good part of it was we were just trying to help. And we used a few drugs, barbiturates and all, I couldn't name all of them, to just help people cope. We didn't believe they were helping any, there was an illness and it was helping a biological, we were just trying to help. And it started out quite well. And later came that social psychiatry sort of movement. And we were also quite psychoanalytic, and we did analyse things. And then when we were using drugs, lots of psychiatrists took them themselves, so they knew what some of the bad side effects were. And we started out quite a good place, and then we just went off on, we did some therapies. We did insulin coma therapy, malarial therapy, ECT, lobotomy, conversion therapy just to make people not gay, and all these things. And then someone had this idea, maybe it is an illness because this drug seems to sort of fix it. And that's where I think the point where psychiatry kind of viewed off, and we then came up with it's a hormone imbalance, and that was the big idea. And then drugs became a big thing in the 40s and 50s, and that was the era where all the antipsychotic and all this stuff came from. And then we got onto chemical imbalance, so it's neurotransmitters now. We're in balance with neurotransmitters, and apparently now we're on immunology. And I think that as many critical psychiatrists are saying, we've forgotten along the way, not only ignoring the fact we still haven't evidenced this, but we've forgotten just to ask people why they're unhappy. Why are you so unhappy, and how can we? So when we offer people pills to their personal problems, especially dangerous ones, and we leave them on them for 20 years, I don't know if that helps fix people's life problems. And I think it's quite dangerous. And I'm going to finish by saying that there are actually some incredibly reputable, at least 2 studies of which I'll reference from the World Health Organization, that did uncover that over the long term, the people that came off their medication and stayed off their medication did a lot better, and a very large percentage. And the other 30%, I think there was no difference. You could attribute that either way, and a small percentage of people felt that they were doing quite well. And of course, that's all respective of your view of doing quite well. They actually did this study. It wasn't funded by pharmaceuticals. They did this themselves. They didn't uncover what they thought they were going to uncover, but they were transparent, and they published results saying, we're not actually sure now that medication is the most helpful thing to start with, because countries that can't afford medication and people that can't take all this medication long term have much better recovery outcomes. And they were so shocked by their own discovery that they replicated that in another 4 countries. I think it was another 4,000 people, and got the exact same results. And it never went to the media, because I'm not going to go there, but there was a big story ages ago in the UK. And there was this study, and it went all over the papers. Antidepressants have been proved to work. Cure depression. And the critical psychiatry I've seen a YouTube with a scientist critiquing that, going, that's not what the result was. That's not very honest about the results, and you haven't included all the appendices, because the public, if they do get hold of a piece of research, which is really hard because you normally got to pay up and join a medical journal, there's big fees, so a lot of us just don't have access economically. But when you actually go for all these studies, all right, that was really massaged, and that went everywhere. Antidepressants work. And yet when the World Health Organization, one of the most legitimate and reputable research companies, does 2 studies across thousands of people, countries, saying we don't think medication is always, in every instance, the best thing for the majority, because look at this, and that never went to the media.